Everyone hear me? Great. Good evening. You may, like many people, wonder or ask us, how do we at the ride currently compare to our peers? And thanks to great work and research by Luke Norman, our intern this summer, and others for reviewing this work diligently, this report is here to answer that question. You might also have seen these recent headlines. According to local and national media, the ride is considered among the top transit providers in the nation. And the numbers back it up. Our rapidly increasing ridership is among the best. It's hitting an all-time high of 6.6 million riders this past year alone. And we're now targeting over 200,000 service hours for the first time in our history. As you probably know, we're also expanding the ride by developing partnerships, notably with the Ann Arbor Public Schools, the City of Ypsilanti, and now Ypsilanti Township as well. And we're improving services without raising fares, which will only continue with the Urban Core Transit Plan. While USA Today and other transportation associations rank the ride as best in class for ridership, operational efficiency, financial stability, and technological innovation, we always strive to do even better. So every few years we conduct these evaluations with our peers in order to measure how we perform compared to other similar mid-sized transit organizations. And tonight I want to briefly share with you the findings for the ride's current relative performance and point out what we see as opportunities for improvement as well. For this report, we relied on the Transit Cooperative Research Program, or TCRP, for ways to analyze the National Transit Database figures as an independent source. The newest survey from them reaffirms that the ride exceedingly delivers both affordable, efficient, and environmentally friendly transportation to all of our customers. So, what constitutes a peer? Here you can see the 12 metrics that measure our peers based on the TCRP peer grouping survey. And this includes things like population, density, growth rate, most importantly probably service provided, as well as the percent of college students, which I'll talk about in a second. Without the context of this sort of methodology, we would not know as clearly and as well who are and who are not our peers. So before I talk about who are our peers, I want to break down a common misunderstanding. Not all university towns have comparable transit. Sometimes student ridership calculations are formulated differently. For example, CATA in Lansing, the Capital Area Transportation Authority, also contracts service with Michigan State University, and that includes campus rides, whereas for the ride here, as you know, we do not do on-campus ridership, although we do serve students off campus. And TCRP also does not recognize other college towns such as Madison, Chapel Hill, and Boulder as peers of the ride either, due to different variations of these metrics. State neighbors, including larger cities like Grand Rapids or Detroit, are sometimes confused as being seen as related to the ride, or Flint too is sometimes grouped into that. But those are, although all large urbanized areas and also having colleges nearby and geographical proximity within the state, are not actually within the top 20 peers, which I'll show you in just a moment. And they're not as similar as they would seem. However, it should be noted that if you were to compare us to some of our Michigan peers, that we carry over 5 times as many passengers, about 4 million more annually than the Michigan median of the top urban large transit agencies. And we have higher costs than several of the Michigan systems because we provide over twice the level of service hours and miles to meet ridership demand. So cost per passenger is actually significantly lower, and I'll go to some slides about how we rank nationally as well. On to the exciting stuff. So who are our peers then? These 20 transit systems were identified as peers of the ride based on the TCRP Similarity Index, which uses the most up-to-date National Transit database data for comparing both fixed route and demand response services. As you can see, the peers here are ranked from left to right, as left being our most similar, Peoria, Illinois, to the farthest but most similar within the top 20 being South Bend. And the networks, you may be able to see both Lansing, Syracuse, Champaign-Urbana, and Gainesville are shaded in lighter blue because those services include university on-campus ridership. And other college, but we do have other peer college towns as well, including Lexington, Fort Collins, and South Bend, as I mentioned. But our only two Michigan peers are Lansing and Kalamazoo. So down to the data highlights. For fixed route, we carry about 34 passenger trips per service hour, as shown by the dark blue column on the left. And the peer median is around 23, which is shown by the red line indicated in the center. So what does that translate to? Well, for every one of our 738 service hours daily, we have approximately 11 more passengers taking trips, on average about 8,000 more boardings per day than our peer median. And other agencies that include college services, other than those, which you can see are quite a bit higher, we actually carry the highest of transit agencies that do not include their university ridership. So if you put U of M service on top, we'd be even more competitive. Specifically, this graph shows that we carry almost 50% more passengers per service hour than the peer median of all of our peers, and that's pretty huge. So with this graph, you can see that our operating expenses are slightly higher than the peer median by about 18%. This is due to higher investment in more productive service, which pays off in ridership growth. We carry more than 65% more passengers than our peers, which explains why our operating costs per service hour are more, in order to sustain excellent service and support growing ridership demands. Overall, if you kind of combine those last two slides, you get this one, which shows that the ride has a lower cost per passenger at $3.36 a person, while the peer median cost is $4.04 per passenger. So our cost per passenger is approximately 17% lower than the peer median. And that's really positive because this is the business we're in, to efficiently carry passengers and less expensively. So we're doing a pretty good job. As a result of all of these, we are able to do our job well by transporting large volumes of passengers, and each for cheaper, as I mentioned. Why? Because although we have higher operating costs per service hour, we now carry almost 50% more passengers per service hour than the peer median. And our operating expense per passenger trip is 17% lower than our peer median. So due to investment in the ride's quality of service, our ridership has skyrocketed. Actually, I guess I went through that kind of quickly. So now I'm going to move over to demand response service. We are very proud that the ride offers an extensive menu of paratransit services for our seniors and people with disabilities that provides more coverage than a fixed route or schedule alone. It's important to mention here that, as you can see, there's a lot of variability, and that's the nature of demand response services that makes peer comparison data more challenging to interpret than just fixed route. For example, the ride is one of only 4 peers that offer demand response shared ride sedan services. With that said, in terms of our demand response operations, we have successfully reduced some of our paratransit costs without compromising the quality of service. And although our passenger trips per service hour are not quite 20% lower than our peer median, which is shown here on the chart, we do provide over twice as many service hours and service miles than the peer median, and we carry over twice as many passengers than the peer median, and that equates to approximately 100,000 more passengers. So together, we end up with more than double the number of riders, served in double the geographic area, during double the available schedule time, for the same price as our middle-of-the-road peers. When I talk about price, our cost per hour per service hour is nearly 17% lower than the peer median, which you can see here. And the ride's cost per mile for demand response operations is also lower than the peer median by about 14%. And if you combine those 2 slides again, you get our operating expense per passenger trip, which is a little more for the peer median than a little more than $25 for demand response service. And the rides is just under $1 less than that for each boarding, or about 2% lower operating costs per paratransit rider than our peer median. So it's a small difference, but it's still a difference for the service. And even though passenger trips per service hour are below the peer median for demand response service, our operating expense per service hour is 17% lower than the peer median. And so that's a positive. And as a result, our operating expense per passenger trip is about 2% lower than the peer median, which means we have an in-demand dial-a-ride service that is able to go the distance for passengers as long as possible and within fiscal constraints, balancing both quality of service and productivity. So in closing, I'd like to say that the survey data from this new peer comparison reinforces what the Ann Arbor News Media is reporting, and the ride is an outstanding mid-sized public transit organization, and we carry over 6 million passengers in our system, 50% more people per service hour than our peer median. Our fiscal performance is strong, our commitment to quality is unwavering, and we are dedicated to being one of the best environmentally friendly public transit agencies in the nation. The percentage of our fleet, as you may know, is comprised of hybrid buses that are the highest in the state of Michigan and among the highest in the country. And we recognize that one of our highest priorities is to continue to control our operating expenses while meeting increasing ridership demands. And our management team will keep working to identify and implement these efficiencies that will further reduce costs and best utilize taxpayer resources. Thank you.